for me, development matter. Development matter. Better try to make a change.
Hello and welcome to Development Matters. On the program today,
decentralization is a prerequisite and necessary precondition for development.
We debate decentralization.
Decentralization in itself does not give development.
Also on the program,
The Grand Bassa County Service Center is really making impact.
we look at county service centers and how they are bringing key government services closer to people outside Monrovia.
For me, I enjoy doing that, to pay my taxes right here instead of paying car to go Monrovia.
Next on the program, we profile a young Liberian who can teach us a lot about overcoming adversity.
As I sit here, my heart is not in Boston. I just ship, want to continue.
But we begin with our debate on decentralization as we now join our moderator on Let's Debate It.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Let's Debate It on Development Matters. I'm your moderator, Councillor Ruth Chapa, one of 3 commissioners of the Law Reform Commission. For several years now, there has been much discussion about decentralizing our national government and devolving some of the powers now concentrated in Monrovia to the counties and local governments. In fact, a draft local government law that calls for far-reaching devolution of powers to the counties and cities and the elections of superintendents, mayors, and other local government officials have been before the national legislature for a while now. Thus, this raises the question, is decentralization a good policy objective? Will decentralization achieve the results its advocates claim, or will it add to the many problems that hamper good governance as its opponents argue? We will attempt to answer these questions today by debating the motion, Decentralization, a necessary and important governmental reform. Appearing in support of the affirmative today is Mr. Boto Zina, who has a master's in urban and regional planning. Appearing for the negative is Professor Francis Mawia, Director of the Graduate School of Regional Science at the University of Liberia. We gave Mr. Zina 3 minutes to make the opening case for the affirmative. We also gave Professor Mawia 3 minutes to make his case for the negative. Mr. Zina will then have 2 minutes for a rebuttal, followed also by 2 minutes of rebuttal by Professor Mawia. Both sides will then have 1 minute for closing arguments. I should note that we have an audience today in the studio. Before the debate begins, we'll see how many of them support or oppose the motion. After the debate, we'll survey the audience again to see if they have been swayed one way or the other by the arguments of our eminent debaters. So, let us see by a show of hands how many of you in the audience support the affirmative that decentralization is a necessary governmental reform. We have 2 in favor. Let's see those who are against the motion. We have 3 against. So we should begin now with Mr. Zina in support of the motion, Decentralization, an important governmental reform. Mr. Zina, take it off.
Thanks, Madam Moderator, and thanks to Professor Mawia. Decentralization brings about transparency. We are aware that transparency is one of the issues that we have been toying with all across this country. When people vote their leaders, the leaders become more accountable to them. And because they vote their leaders, they have the authority to question those leaders when they are not delivering. When that is happening at the local level, it will transcend to the national level. It brings about legitimacy. When people are elected, they have a responsibility to respond to the needs of the people. And if they don't meet the needs and expectations of those that elect them, of course, they have the authority and the power to demand actions. That is missing in Liberia currently. People who run our subnational governments and administrative locales, like the superintendents, the mayors across this country, including the mayor of Monrovia, are not elected. And as such, who do they owe their loyalty to? To the presidency of this country. If the next administration comes and these people are appointed again, their accountability will be to the president that will be elected and not to the people that they should be governing. And we believe this is high time that this should change. And it's one of the tenets of decentralization, and that's why we are making the case now That's our local leaders should be elected. And when they are elected, we can call upon them, we can have our local town hall meeting, and they can answer the questions that we have. If we are not satisfied, we have the tool to take the actions consistent with the process and the tenets of decentralization and democracy. People will feel part of the governance system, and as such, they will be more energetic, more energized, and they will embrace development in a way that we have not seen in this country before. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Zina. Professor Mawia, your turn.
Thank you, Councillor Japa, and thank you, Mr. Zina. I feel that election in itself does not bring about effectiveness of government or efficiency. One can be even appointed and be very effective based on vetting, by maybe civil service or so. Decentralization has its own fault. For instance, you in Liberia advocating for political decentralization, administrative decentralization, and fiscal decentralization. If you create, and overlap government functions, who's going to pay for the newly created positions and all you're going to create in the various counties, in the 15 counties? You are telling us that we should have 15 government because you want to even create a district assembly that will be in confrontation with the national legislature that you have already elected. Where is the capacity? Where do you have the capacity from to mend the kind of government that you want to operate? And I still feel that it is not the answer to corruption. It is not the answer to the suffering and the underdevelopment that we are going through in this country. I think the answer is to tighten our belt, straighten up our system that is already existing and make it very functional so that, we will have small government, small and effective government that can run this country instead of overlapping and creating more problem for ourselves when it comes to decentralizing and creating more jobs that we don't have money to pay. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Maria. Now for rebuttals, we start with Mr. Zina for the affirmative.
My colleague has argued that election at a subnational level in themselves doesn't bring about efficiency in our governance structure. But I'd like to look at it from a different angle. While election themselves does not bring all the solution, but elections without a necessary authority that goes with this position would not bring about the efficiency that we desire through decentralization. When they are elected at a subnational level, they should be given the financial or the fiscal space, the political space to take decisions without any influence from central administration. That means they can raise their own taxes, they can take decisions without answering to maneuver. With that form of framework, with such authority, with such leverage, we do believe that efficiency will be. But without such framework, there will be no efficiency, like my colleague has said. So definitely, election will not bring about efficiency, but the legislation around elections that will bring about authority, devolution of fiscal authority to a subnational level entity will bring about the efficiency that we so desire. Decentralization is a prerequisite and necessary precondition for development. And this government has already embarked on that process. I hope that the succeeding government that will come will pick up from where this administration has left and continue down the path of decentralization. Because for 170 years, centralized administration has not delivered development. I do believe decentralization is the way forward if we must bring tangible benefits and encourage the level of participation that we want our people to have, embracing their own development and making decisions in situations and matters that affect them.
Thank you, Mr. Zina. Now let's hear from Professor Mawia for his rebuttal.
Decentralization in itself does not give development. It's just a frame of government that we are talking about. In order for us to stop development, to start corruption and encourage development, we don't need to send power to devolve complete power to the small country that we have with less population. I think where we are right now, we can rally around, look at the policy and see what concept that the government will bring in for development. For instance, you can look at agriculture, and because about 80% of our population live in the rural area involved in subsistence farming. These people can be changed into a tool of development, which you don't have to necessarily change the frame of the government in order for it to bring development. we can grab that concept to use agriculture as a basis for development, because vast majority of our people involved in agriculture, we spend most of our money on the activities that will bring result to us. I mean, decentralization is just a political rhetoric that people read about Ghana, read about the Ivory Coast, read about Uganda. You will always find out that, decentralization has just appeared, on the table for discussion, political discussion. But to think that development can be brought to us in Liberia by decentralizing, in fact, not only decentralizing, but devolving, our state authority into the local area, that in fact there is a low capacity of people to carry on, that alone is a fallacy. And I want to think that we need to fetter the ground better so that decentralization can work if it will come.
Thank you very much, Professor Mawia. Before we go to closing arguments, which I allowed 1 minute, we take questions from our studio audience.
All right, this question is for you, Mr. Zina. Decentralization comes along with a lot of bureaucracies within the counties. Where we will have the capacity to drive this bureaucracy?
80% of our people live in the rural area, and they lack the capacity. But also interesting to note that almost all the resources that the previous administration have managed come from those areas that 80% of the people you talk about reside. And it was also interesting to note that they have little or no say in what happens to the resources in terms of allocation, in terms of it trickling down. They don't feel the impact of it. Couple with that, we look at the administrative situation. It is true that at the subnational level, the administrative situation as currently configured will not really yield the kind of benefits we talk about. That's why we need to look at our own unique situation. Look at the kind of laws we need to enact, the kind of legislation we need to bring about, the kind of administrative framework we need to establish in order to deliver development through the mechanism of decentralization in a way that people are themselves the forerunner of their own development. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Zina. We now have another question from the audience.
Yes, Professor Mawia, this question is for you. For 170 years now, we've been having a centralized government, and we've been struggling with corruption and unemployment. Don't you think now it's time that we try something new, like a decentralized government?
There is no need to think that if you devolve power to the people, it will fight corruption. I think it will breed more corruption. I think what we need to do is to strengthen, the system that we have to make it very effective, so that corruption will be punishable. Whether you take it locally or centrally, corruption needs to be fought, at the extreme level.
Thank you, Professor Mawia. Now for closing arguments, we begin with Mr. Zina.
It is high time that we bring the population of this country into the fold of development, giving them the incentives, giving them the tools, giving them the power and authority that they so need to channel their own developmental agenda. As is currently configured, our current system of administration does not in any way bring about development in a way that take into consideration the challenges of our people at the subnational level. It's about time that we bring that into the fold. Decentralization is a tool of stability. It's a tool of development. It has been tested in places around the world, primarily in Africa. USAID in 2012, they studied through ARD, and there was overwhelming support and fact that decentralization does work. And it's time that in Liberia, we do embrace decentralization. We just celebrated 170 years of independence. Can we see 170 years of development? Certainly not. If it has not worked for 170 years, why are we so of the impression that it will work again for another 170 years? It's about time we have a second opinion, a second option. And I think decentralization is the way to go. Thank you.
We now join Mr. Mawia for his closing arguments.
I still maintain that decentralization is not a way out for this country. You are talking about creating overlapping government employees over government employees. A group of people in the central and a group of people also in the local government setting that require financial burden on the country. Decentralization in itself will not mean that corruption is over. It doesn't mean that, committing crimes all around here is over. It doesn't mean that we will just get one day in the morning and see the country change because of decentralization. So I think that in order for this country, to be safe for all of us to enjoy, let us strengthen what we have, for development purpose.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mawye. Thank you. Now we'll go to our studio audience. Studio audience, there you have it. You have heard the arguments at the hands of those who are in favor of decentralization as an important governmental reform. We have two. Before we had two, now we still have two. Let's see those who are against decentralization as an important governmental reform. Minds were not changed by the arguments. We still have 3 against and 2 for. There you go. Thank you very much to our studio audience, our radio and television audience, and also a big thank you to our eminent debaters. I've been your moderator, Councillor Ruth Jaffa, and goodbye.
This is Development Matters. We'll be back in just a moment.
I'm talking about my unborn future. No matter what you ask, still my message will reach you. Corruption killing all will not satisfy. Make my heart burn slow until I testify. But certain people in the country I will notify.
Welcome back to Development Matters. Until 3 years ago, no matter where you lived in Liberia, you had to travel to Monrovia if you wanted key documents like marriage certificates, driver's licenses, or land deeds. If you wanted to register a business, you had to do the same. 3 years ago, the government began trying to bring these services closer to the people with the establishment of county service centers in the various counties. 10 counties now have the centers, and we recently visited the one in Grand Bassa County, the first to open, to see how things are working out.
The Grand Bassa County Service Center is really making impact. Making impact because we are taking the services down here to the people. And the service center is a one-stop shop area.
We provide a service to the people when it comes to business registration. We do the corporation, we do the partnership, we do the sole proprietor, and petty trade, a small business.
The results have been good. In its first 2 years of operations, the center registered hundreds of businesses, generating significant revenues.
We registered 584 businesses and we generated over $5 million Liberian and 10,000 plus US dollars.
Wakbe has a simple explanation for the brisk pace of business registration at the center.
You can find our people coming. In the past, they used to go to Monrovia to do the registration. They used to give them $100,000 and go spend 2-3 days in Monrovia. And maybe you carry food money, the money will not be enough. It's easier here. Next person.
I just came to the service center to get my documents set, register my business, a photo studio, LRB image.
We register and preserve all categories of legal and statutory documents. For example, we have the land deeds, different categories. We have warranty, we have a public land sale, we have administrator's deed, we have court degrees.
Macaulay reports increased use of the services she provides.
57 instruments were registered. Total revenue that was generated was $117,255 Liberian dollars.
Which kind of tax you come to pay? Do you have any document?
I can pay my 4%.
Mohammed Trading Center of Grand Bassa County, 4% gross income tax the first quarter.
To pay tax on the land that I bought, and I think it's a good thing to do as a lawful citizen in the country. We need to pay tax to our government because our tax bring in development. Government make it easier for us so that we can do everything right here in our county. So for me, I enjoy doing that, to pay my taxes right here instead of paying car to go Monrovia.
The Grand Bassa County Services Center, really making a difference. This is Development Matters. We now profile a young Liberian who can teach us all important lessons about overcoming adversity.
I am a woman of 2 children with two different fathers. Life had not been easy for me. And when the war came, I had to leave my country and went to Guinea and selling my clothes just to feed my family. Even that could not help me. I said it was better for me to go back home and die there.
Her life soon changed, however, after she heard of the Goldman 10,000 Women Project funded by Goldman Sachs to provide basic business skills to women like Sumbo.
This day I was sitting in the market, worried, thinking on how my life would be. My friend told me, said, oh, there's a program at Cuttington by the name of CHF. They are training women. Since you say you want to be in business, I think you will take opportunity of it. I said, wow. And I got there, I passed the interview. So they called me for me to go to the program.
The program provided her skills in, among other things, record keeping.
As I sit here today, I know how much all I got in my warehouse.
Accounting.
I know how much my daughter carried to the bank yesterday.
Reinvesting profits.
Do all those things correctly so that my business can go on.
And customer service.
I know my human resource. I know how to deal with my customer and my employees.
She no longer hides when the tax collector comes.
Because the program had taught me to do all those things correctly so that my business can go on.
Armed with her new business skills and with a small loan, she soon expanded her palm oil business and is now exporting oil. She, in fact, cracked the U.S. market.
I shipped my first container of oil, 150 things, after I graduated from the program.
Sumbo has made her country proud.
During the graduation, my president was so impressed about me. She awarded me 100 acres of land to improve my business.
Sumbo can now better support her family.
Because of this program, my life has changed.
Is even providing jobs for other Liberians.
My children, my family, my relatives, and even my countrymen have benefited from it.
She was a special guest at the Clinton Global Initiative in 2012. Featured articles have appeared about Kabeh's story in Bloomberg and the Washington Post. All of this is the result of a small investment in changing the life of one woman.
As I sit here, my oil is not in Boston. I just ship one container. So the program has been so important, great to me.
This is Development Matters. And now for Historicana, we take a look at a city that occupies a special place in Liberian history, one of our oldest cities and birthplace of a president, Edina.
This city was founded 1832, December 18.
That was 10 years after the first set of settlers from the United States landed in Liberia, and 15 years before Liberia would become independent. No wonder Edina, located at the mouth of the St. John River in Bassa County, reeks with history. It is the birthplace of Liberia's 12th president, Joseph James Cheeseman. It also has ties to other key players in Liberia's early history, including the country's second president, Stephen Allen Benson, whose heirs still call Edina home.
Charles A. Benson, great-grandson of the late Stephen Allen Benson.
The city was a thriving place in its heydays. The settlers quickly established a school, and by 1839, they had built 2 churches that still stand today. Early residents were traders. Cheeseman, for example, ran a robust business, bringing goods from Monrovia and the United States. For those days, he had a pretty good-sized warehouse and office, the ruins of which still stand on the banks of the St. John River. Edina shows what is possible when all Liberians come together, irrespective of ethnic backgrounds. There is a monument here to Bob Gray, a Bassa king or chief, who welcomed the settlers and provided them with critical support.
Bob was the one that gave them safe drinking water and then gave them the place to settle. But his Bassa name was Kanasi.
Today, the city is a far cry from the bustling port city it was in its heydays, mentioned in the 1839 Constitution of the Commonwealth of Liberia as one of the country's major cities. It has lost most of its residents. There is no more big-time trading. People are principally farmers and fishermen.
The activity we do for survival, those are in the position of able, to make rice farm, we make a rice farm. For majority of the citizens here, we make a sour farm. And then we who at this level, we mostly get out from the water. We sell basket for coffee, we sell tash, we sell net.
But with all this wonderful history and beautiful scenery, there is much potential for bringing Edina back to life, possibly as a tourist attraction. And this is a nugget from our history.
And now we get a letter from the diaspora.
My dear Liberians and members of the Cuttington University family, our university, like many educational institutions in Liberia, needs help in many areas. So we in the Americas organize a number of events to help our dear alma mater. In April 2016, we donated over $25,000 to the construction of a water pump and purchased over 500 gallons of paint to paint buildings on our campus and gave it a much-needed facelift. Additionally, we purchased several electric lawnmowers, grass trimmers, and other equipment to keep our landscape looking neat. Our next challenge is to raise $43,000 to renovate computer labs and dormitories, as well as to construct 2 additional water pumps. The 25th anniversary celebration of the Cuttington University Alumni Association in the Americas will be held on August 18th to the 20th of 2017. It will bring together our members and well-wishers in Charlotte, North Carolina, USA, to rally and raise the funding to do other projects that will improve the quality of life for those students who are following in our footsteps at the university. Visit our website at www.cuttingtonalumni.org or go to our GoFundMe page and contribute to a cause that will benefit the entire Cuttington family and Liberia as a whole. We thank everyone who has made it possible for us to help Cuttington in all of our undertakings, past and to come. We are one. Sincerely, Glendy Junius Reeves, President of Cuttington University Alumni Association in the Americas.
Well, that's our program for today. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on another edition of Development Matters.
Development matters, development matters. If for you, if for me, development matters, development matters. Gotta try to make a change. We need roads, food security.